I sold 5 houses off of that first condo that I bought. Well, that was the first one. And so I was like, well, if it works good on one, let's go for two. So as opportunities presented themselves, I started taking my earnings and using and leveraging that into other purchases.
Steve,
Good morning. How are you?
what's up? How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks.
I appreciate you. You're the first guy that signed up. So the number one agent in the state of Texas, being the first person to sign up for the Stars Among Us podcast was, I thought, pretty fitting. We met down
Right.
in San Antonio briefly. Didn't have a
Yeah.
lot of time. We got a chance to shake hands and say hello. That was a pretty cool event.
Yeah. No, it's fantastic. Yeah, that's the best event that I've been to, short of the last convention that Coldwell had in Vegas. So, that was a really cool venue in San Antonio, and you guys did it right
People are
for
off their
sure.
heads with getting back together again too. Like, I don't know if you noticed that, but like, there's definitely something to this idea that we were in some form of isolation. Like in Texas, you guys weren't that bad, but like there was still some isolation. That when people are getting back together again, they seem super excited about it, and it adds a lot of energy to everything.
Sure. No, absolutely. No, it was definitely a fun event. Good to get together.
Cool, man. All right, so listen, the gist of this, you got the email where I invited you to this, is that I'm blown away by the fact that we've got so many agents that have done so well in 2021, the year that you weren't supposed to be able to sell any houses because there was no houses to sell, and yet there's success stories out there like you. And so I just have a couple of questions, and we're going to talk kind of free form. The first one is,
Okay.
Did you know how much? Did you know? I mean, you've done a lot of business last year, and so you probably do know. But did you know that your business increased 429% last year?
Yes, 100%. Well, it's no accident that I hit those numbers. That's one of the things I talk about is goals and how to constantly reevaluate where you're at and where you want to be. And yeah, it was no accident that it was 400 or 500% increase.
You didn't just stumble on that, huh?
And another thing that was really cool that was pointed out to me, I didn't take a single discount all year. So
Really?
my commission was 3%.
Really?
Which was kind of cool, because I remember starting out the first couple of years, you get people that would just hammer you on a listing appointment, and you were hungry for the business and you'd acquiesce and take a little discount. But now, I rarely have that conversation anymore, and
It's interesting.
a little more swagger and confidence, and it's very easy to explain it away and move on to the next subject in the listing appointment versus getting frozen like a deer in headlights and
Yeah. Well, that is impressive because you're
worry
right.
whether you're going to get the deal or not.
Yep.
So
Now, how did you do it? Like you saw that's a big jump, and it wasn't like you didn't go from like 10,000 to 50,000. I won't share the numbers, but you went from a really solid level of production you've had for several years.
I went from 3 years of around $9 to $10 million, and then all of a sudden, the next year was that 400%. But it wasn't really all of a sudden. So what had happened towards the end of 2020 is I was able to turn back on a pipeline that I had through Zillow.
Okay.
And one of the things that I've learned in advertising, I went to school and studied advertising at the University of Texas, and you've always got to test whether your advertising is working or not. And when everything is working, it's really hard to pinpoint what is that one source that's really causing you to generate revenue. And one easy way is you turn off a few sources and you see what happens.
Right.
And back in early 2020, cash was getting kind of tight, but I was also about to get really busy with a ton of closings. I was like, hey, I got this. I can turn this off. I can save a few $1,000s a month. I got this. Well, once I processed through all of those transactions, I wasn't paying attention to my pipeline. And then all of a sudden, I get all these great closings, and then the phone's not ringing. And I go,
Right.
Ring phone, ring. What do you do? You run around, do a bunch of open houses, and you reach out to your sphere, and you pick up a little bit there. But I had turned off a pipeline that was a big percentage of my business. So I was able to get back in and turn it on. It took a while because all of a sudden there was a waiting list. There was a waiting list. Obviously, it's working for other realtors. And once I got it turned on about the 15th of December, my phone started blowing up New Year's Eve. And in
Okay.
January, all of a sudden, I had the previous year's business booked already. I had
Jeez.
put under contract like 3 or 4, and I got lucky with a couple really big transactions. So a couple things happened in my mind at that point. You know what? If I can do $10 million in 1 month, why can't I do it in 2 months? Or why can't I do 10 million in a quarter? Reassessing my goals, because if I can handle all this in 1 month, why not? And the other thing is when that pipeline, when the phone started ringing, after not having it ring for so long, I was picking up my phone nonstop. And that's probably one of the biggest challenges. A lot of realtors, they don't pick up their phone. You don't get the business because we're a society of instant gratification. People want immediate answers to their questions. They hit contact agent or they call one agent and then that person doesn't pick up. They're speed dialing the next one. So I was picking up my phone nonstop.
Let me stop there for a second. So I like the way you frame this. So you did something that is classic. Sometimes you get stuck in no man's land because you had a lot of business and that business all of a sudden closed and you were sitting pretty, but then it was time to get back on the hamster wheel again. You said, oh no, I let the wheel stop. So you ramped it up,
Right.
and it was mainly Zillow. You basically put a spend into Zillow. You caught the timing right and you got flooded. But these are mainly buyers, I'm guessing. Yes?
Yeah, they're mainly buyers. And remember, I've only been in the business almost 5 years. So,
Right.
I don't have a whole lot of past clients that are selling that home that I sold them 10 years ago or 5 years ago. So, starting out, it's been mainly buyers. So, yeah,
No, it's great.
Zillow
Listen,
is mainly buyers.
Listen, Zillow is an interesting relationship because there's a lot of people in the industry that are down on Zillow, but like it's a phenomenal business opportunity for agents that make the investment, and you're living proof that when you do it right. So these are people can picture being on Zillow. They're looking at a property they like. They click on, contact agent. That goes to Zillow, and they start getting on the phone with the people that are paying to be there. You were one of them, and so you had that phone hot on your hip, ready to draw.
Right.
But it was buyers, which is interesting. So you could definitely confirm that response time is everything when it comes to an impulsive lead like that. If they move on, they've moved on with their day, moved on with their life, and you're in the rearview mirror at that point.
Yes, absolutely. No, I mean, you got to respond within. I don't wait for the second ring. No, I pick it up right away because usually there's a transition, from the Zillow bot to me. And the other thing is knowing my market. I'm in Texas, and the majority of our transactions, or at least on the buy side, are people coming from out of Texas. Well, guess what? Those people don't know Realtor.
Right.
So they use the number one tool to find people, and that happens to be Zillow right now. I think about 75, 80% of the people do their home search out of state using Zillow. So they hit contact agent, and Zillow's not for everybody. I mean, you've got to have the gift of the gab and to be able to jump right into, sales pitch mode, but being conversational and friendly and informative and get them to like you in 30 to 60 seconds, enough to want to carry the conversation further. Right. So,
you probably always had that. When did you figure out, how old were you as probably a kid when you figured out that you had the likability index working in your favor, that people took a shine to you in the first minute and you decided to make a career around that?
I don't know if I decided to make a career in junior high, but I had that likability factor, and I was an athlete and popular and things like that.
Were you a lousy student too?
You know what? I did well enough to get into the University of Texas back in the 80s. So
there you go. Obviously, I'm asking that because I've got a son graduating high school right now who's like an 8.5 out of 10 on a likability scale, and is struggling to get out of the C's in terms of his grades. And I keep telling him, don't worry. There's a world out there that values that. So that's interesting how when it comes to lead gen, you make a spend, you track what you're spending, you track what you're getting in. Clearly, it worked for you last year, and so you're continuing, I'm sure. But that response time, I saw some data that came out of Harvard that showed that direct response marketing, the conversion rate after 10 minutes just goes practically to zero, right? Like they literally are sitting there on their phones, on their computers. They're thinking about this thing, and then something else in their life comes along, and they've moved on, and they'll start again later on, and they'll go to somebody else. So you hit them quick with the, I'm your new friend in Austin kind of a thing, and they get rapport quickly with you.
Yeah. They've got a native Austinite. I know the whole market, and and I transact a lot. And you're in good hands, and I ask a lot of questions. People love to talk about themselves, right? It's just pretty easy. You start asking questions about them, and that makes them feel important. And at the same time, you're gathering info, right? And then you know how to steer the conversation, and what's next steps and moving forward.
Can we pretend that I'm a customer who is coming out of California, who just clicked on I'm interested in this, $1 million house, which is just barely above sort of average. You do a lot of business down by the lake, so $1 million is not crazy. But you know that what $1 million buys where I am in California is not even near as close. So let's imagine that I clicked on contact agent, and now what happens? I'm on the phone and they direct connect me to you?
Yeah. Hey, Greg, is this Greg?
This is Greg.
This is Steve Dedear. I'm a local realtor in Lakeway. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. Well, Zillow patched us together. I spend a small fortune to get phone calls like this, so your call is very important to me. And I see that you're looking at this property on 467 Main Street. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Good. Well, do you have any specific questions about that listing? I'm not in front of my computer right now. I'm driving, but I wanted to take this call. Are there any specific questions, or did you just want to set up an appointment to go see the property?
My real question is that I understand that it is really hard to get a house right now in Austin. There's so much competition out there. This has only been on the market for, less than a week, but like, what are my chances? It's Friday. I'm not there. Is this thing going to sell this weekend? And like, what should I expect?
Yeah, well, you're right on a lot of those fronts. It is a super hot market. In fact, you're from California, is that correct?
That's right.
A lot of my buyers are coming from the West Coast, and they're coming down here with a lot of money, and there's not enough inventory. So what we're seeing is prices getting run up, and we're seeing inventory last 1 to 4 or 5 days on the market before they enter into contract. And typically what happens in our market is if it goes live on MLS on Wednesday or Thursday, usually by Sunday, they're calling for all offers due, or by Monday. Now, if a property doesn't go into multiple offer situations after about 7 days, there could be some opportunity where you can make an offer on it and you're not competing with another offer, or maybe even an opportunity to come in a little bit lower than asking price. So, every property is unique. One thing that I have working with me is that I know a lot of the realtors in the area, so I have that open dialogue. So, and I've lived out here forever. So I have a pretty good sense of what properties are going to sell right away and which ones might take a little bit longer. Even if it takes a little bit longer, it doesn't necessarily mean there's something wrong with the house. It could just be a pricing issue. So, each house is unique, and, I'm happy to pull the numbers for you, and we'll go take a look at it and see if it's something that you're really interested in.
That's great. So we'll come off the role play now. Thank you for doing that. I appreciate you. Let me put you on the spot, but that's smooth,
Sure.
Right? And you're right. Like as a buyer, I'm thinking to myself, all right, I've heard, I've read about the gauntlet that I'm about to run through. This guy seems to have some experience with that. And I like the fact that you told me that there's hope. Like they're not all, people say things like every house is selling for double the asking price in 24 hours. Like, well, that's an exaggeration.
Right.
And there are plenty of examples of things that they overshoot on their asking price. The first weekend passes, and all of a sudden that seller who's the king on the throne gets a little bit closer to earth, maybe not all the way, but a little bit closer. How have you dealt with, if you're heavy on Zillow leads, making that investment? And it was brilliant to tell them out of the gate that you pay a small fortune. Is that one of the lines you use consistently in the beginning?
Hey, it breaks the ice. I mean, I'm not answering the phone from a call center. I'm a real guy. I'm a real realtor. And, if I'm paying a small fortune, that means I'm probably doing a good amount of business. And I think people want to associate with winners.
In one phrase,
I'm not new at this. And and you know what? A lot of the folks that are calling, those guys and ladies, they're business owners. They get that.
Right.
You know what I mean? If they're buying $1 million house or a $10 million house, they understand how that works. And we don't just sit on our thumbs waiting for the phone to ring. I mean, you got to do something to make that happen. So it's just one avenue that's worked really well with me.
I think it's cool to be informed also that you're a valuable lead, right? I mean, it's in this day and age. I mean, I'm trying to get work. You probably maybe you hear hammering in the background. We've got some work being done around the house. The number of phone calls you have to make to get somebody to show up these days for anything is amazing. You know, you call six contractors and 3 of them get back to you, and one of them is willing to like show up on time for the appointment. It's different in real estate, but not really. I mean, I buy a lot of houses as investments, and I make a lot of inquiries, and the rule is they're not going to call me back. The exception to the rules that I'm going to hear back from them. And the assumption is that, they sold the house to somebody else. They don't care. But anyway, this is good stuff. So it's an incredible number that you achieved this year. And I'm wondering, how did that change your life?
Wow. Well, it changed my perspective for sure. I think it got me into some company that I feel more comfortable with as far as the higher end market.
Okay.
I feel like I have a little bit more swagger, a lot more confidence, and it also changed one of the big things is it changed my expectations. So I mentioned earlier, I started off with a really strong January and those closings happened in February. I reevaluated, where I was trending and said, you know what, let's set a realistic goal of $10 million a quarter, which means $3.5 million a month, which means X amount of transactions a week. If I can close on something once a week or a big one every 2 weeks, let's reevaluate that and just focus on just that quarter, not this big goal of 40 million for the year, but let's just focus on that quarter. And then hitting that goal, gave me confidence that I can do it again and keep repeating that. And so what happens is, like, in the middle of the quarter, I'm like, oh no, what about the first month of next quarter? What do I have in my pipeline? So not only was I focused on the transactions that I had in play, but my pipeline. What do I got to do? So I would keep a list like this with me at all times with customer names. Yeah. And I would take it with me in my car because sometimes I take those phone calls in the car, but keeping those names in front of me and the dollar amounts and the total. And I would say, all right, I've got this coming in April. What do I have in May? So it kept me focused on my goals nonstop. And, when you get your goals in front of you, that's where your focus tends to go versus there's a million other things I could be doing. And starting making some money, there's plenty of distractions that can come along with that, vacations and toys.
So you keep the goals intentionally front and center so that when the wind blows, which happens every hour of every day, you've got yourself anchored to what you're trying to accomplish. And you're off to a strong start this year. Are you keeping up right now with the kind of pace you wanted?
It's kind of funny. So yeah, after that great year, we've taken a couple of vacations since the beginning of the year, and so I've gotten a little bit off of what I'm preaching about keeping the goals. And I've got a lot of stuff in the pipeline, but I haven't closed a whole lot yet. But in April, I'll close a little bit over $5 million. But yeah, taking a few vacations and taking a little time off to put some balance in my life. It comes at a little bit of a cost, but but
you got to live along the way.
I worked extremely hard last year. I needed a break. And so now I feel like I'm recharged. I've got my list again, traveling around with me, and, I'm a lot more focused, and I'm taking a lot more phone calls. For a while I was like,
Are you starting to see the momentum building? You mentioned you only been in the business 5 years, so you don't have the book of business, the past book of business, but that's changing pretty rapidly when you have a year like you did last year. Are you starting to see that referral machine start to percolate?
Absolutely. Well, actually, the majority of that 5 million I spoke about, those are people that I transacted with in the last couple of years that I originally met on Zillow. And so they're coming back around. They're taking profits. Some of them bought some investment properties, changed the direction of where they wanted to go. And so we'll just sell these properties because our market's moving so fast at 25 to 40% appreciation in a year. Some of these guys are selling their stuff in less than a year. I made them $1 million. And so, and then the next step is, all right, where are we going to put this money so we can keep doing this? And so I'm starting to get the repeat business off of people that I closed 3 and 4 years ago. And so now instead of 80% buyer, I'm closer to 50-50 on listings versus the buy side.
Wow, that's great. And those are coming on referral.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you just got to reach out and touch them every now and then, not necessarily asking for the business, but just checking seeing how they're doing, staying relevant and in their life and reminding them that you're still a realtor. Um, every now and then you'll see a listing come on the market and it's somebody that you sold and it kind of stings a little bit. And so it's a reminder. It's like, man, if I would have just called that guy about once every 6 months, maybe I would have been that person that listed it. And, but you live and learn.
Steve, how do you keep track now that your book of business is getting deeper? What do you do to remind yourself to make those calls to that specific person at any given time?
I really don't have a great system on that. Every now and then around holidays, I like to send text to people, whether it's Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. So sometimes I'll just scrolling through my text log and I'll see a name and I go, I haven't talked to them in a while. And it may just be sending a simple text or just a quick email. I don't really have a great system. It's something that I could do. It's just finding the time of day.
I'm glad I asked because that's exactly perfect then, that if you don't have a great system for your book and your book is now starting to really grow and go deeper, that's one of the things that you can layer in this year. Take a little time, layer in one of those systems so that you get the tickler file, you make sure that you're combing through A to Z, and you're going to see a boost in your business as a result of that. So that's how I love finding an opportunity with somebody who's already knocking it out of the park, but yet there's still a part of the business that, and by the way, the book of business being deliberate and organized about it is the way that most people get to where you've gotten, and you've gotten there without actually having that nailed down yet. So when you nail that down, that's going to have another propulsion effect on your business overall. So it's perfect.
Right. No, I appreciate that.
So another question for you. So have you started to, like you got ranked number one for Coldwell Banker in all of Texas. So congratulations. That's pretty awesome.
Thank you.
You raised up, went up the ranks really fast last year and took the top spot. Are you getting any mileage out of that yet? Are you starting to talk about that with people?
Oh yeah, I use it all the time. Sometimes right up front, like I mentioned earlier, people want to do business with winners. They want to feel comfortable they're with a person that can get them to the finish line and get their purchase done or their house sold. So yeah, I leverage that. I've started to put little things in some of my social media, Facebook and Instagram, signature lines, things like that. It's something to be proud of. And usually the reaction I get is pretty awesome. People are like, wow, so
the number one agents in the state of Texas for the number one real estate company in the world. That means you're one of 50 people nationwide that are wearing that crown of the top in the state, and it's the state of Texas. So it's not Rhode Island. Yeah. Nothing against Rhode Island, but it's Texas, right? So
no, it's Texas. It's a hot market, and that was also one of my goals. Is I was really working at the fourth quarter last year to make sure that I was number one in Austin. And it's kind of a secret because we don't know what the other offices where their agents are at, and so I was keeping close tabs on a couple of people in that top 5 and trying to extrapolate, estimate where they're at. And even when I got at the very end of the fourth quarter, I was just shy of my $40 million goal. So I went out and bought a condo from my daughter and took full commission on it to get me to that 40 million number. And just to create a little buffer that I thought it was that tight. And, it was a great investment too. And that's a whole other discussion. You mentioned that you've been doing that forever.
Right.
I make $1 million a year on the side buying investment properties.
Do you?
And yeah, it's not that complicated buying one or two properties. And in my market, when the value goes up 25 to 40% a year, it's tax-free equity build, and the cash flow is insane because we have such a shortage of houses that my cash flow is double my carrying cost on my rental properties, and they're all in my neighborhood, and so it's very easy to manage. I've got 7 doors, and And that's been a good lead generator too. So, just
Yeah,
a
that's
quick
cool.
story. So 4.5 years ago, right when I first got into this and got my license, I sold a condo that I was living in, took what little profit that was. This was before the market was crazy. And I found another condo in the neighborhood and got the guy to do a seller finance deal. So I put enough down to cover the other agent's side. So this was only like a $200,000 purchase. So I put down like $15,000. And my very first tenant, I decided I was going to do shorter term rentals so that I could attract perhaps a buyer coming to the area that would want to buy a house. As soon as we
That's
find
smart.
them a house, they're off the hook. So I just furnished it and made it all bills paid. I made it the easy button. Well, the first guy that rented from me, within a month, we found him a $750,000 house in the neighborhood. So I made like 20 grand off of him. And so I was like, this is awesome lead generation. So I got to do more of this.
So wait, so you did, it's not an Airbnb, it's like a monthly rental?
Yeah, like 1 to 6 months max. In fact, I would have people go, I'll rent it for a year. I go, no, that's not what I want. You can stay here for 2 or 3 months.
6 months.
Yeah, and we're going to help you buy a house. Yes, exactly. And so I sold 5 houses off of that first condo that I bought. Well, that was the first one. And so I was like, well, if it works good on one, let's go for 2. So as opportunities presented themselves, I started taking my earnings and using and leveraging that into other purchases. And sometimes then I became kind of a little expert in the condos in my community. So I would get these listings. And so I go in a listing appointment and I go, this is what we think it's worth. This is what we'll take. And there were times I go, you know what? I love this property. Yeah. How about you sell it? If you didn't have to go through open houses and all that kind of business, what would you be willing to sell it for? You give me the price. And they would give me a number. And sometimes it was less than what we agreed on should be the asking price. I said, all right. And so I'm getting them at a 6% discount or more.
Unbelievable. And so that's a brilliant, what I love about this job and the opportunity to talk to guys like you is that I thought I heard everything, right? I never heard anybody talk about buying a short-term rental when you're in one of these inbound markets that's got a lot of flow coming in, where the gift that you give somebody by saying, hey, look, you don't have to have the pressure, like the role playing we did 20 minutes ago, where I was like a guy who, like, I'm not going to make it this weekend, so I'm not going to be able to buy the house I'm calling on. What do I do? Yeah. You take that fear away. Have you ever had a situation where somebody's calling you in that state of anxiety and you say, look, I got a place for you that if you want to come
all
down
the time. All the time. I go, what's your situation? Well, my job starts on Monday. I really don't want to rent an apartment for 12 months. I don't want to live in an apartment. And I got to go, guess what? I got something for you. And, it's the easy button. And you're not left with unused lease, that you've got to pay off when you buy a house, and you're getting a neighborhood expert. And you get to try the neighborhood out.
You're doing the corporate rental thing. That's what corporations do for years. And they get to try the neighborhood on for size. They get to try the job on for size, and then they have all the time in the world to, cast a net out for the right property to buy. That's really brilliant, Steve. I'm impressed. I'm excited for you. I mean, you landed on something now. The idea that you're running advertising, your advertising includes this other flexibility in a situation where people are trying to figure out, how do I make the move when I can't buy a house? And you solve that problem for them. They're paying you rent on a short-term basis, which means you're getting an outsized yield, because short-term rentals do better in terms of price per square foot rental-wise than longer-term rentals. Then you're flipping them to a house and then putting somebody else in, and these things are getting more valuable by the day.
Oh, they've all doubled in short order in this market. And so remember, I started that story. I put $15,000 in that first unit. Last month, I pulled out over $1 million in equity to be able to keep doing what I've been doing. I refinanced. I did a cash out refi on all those properties, pulled out over $1 million, and so now I can go buy a ton more, or
so
have that money just there when the right opportunity strikes.
What do you want to have, 25 doors by the time this run is over the next few years?
Yeah, if I've got 20 doors, I'm that would be awesome.
Yeah,
but
you don't want you to stop working.
it's $30,000 worth of rents coming in a month just on what I have.
Yeah.
So, do
Brilliant.
the math. I mean, that's my retirement, is if I can double my inventory, and there's never a need to sell it because I put them in an LLC and those will pass down to my kids,
Right.
and if I need cash, I can just, they're going to be loaded with equity. So,
Right.
but it's a great side hustle, and it also keeps me involved with more people in the neighborhood. A lot of times these folks that come and rent from me, they're building a house, so they're not necessarily my client coming in. They're already building a house, but I had an opportunity to interact with them, and so maybe down the road, when they get ready to sell that house that they're building, they'll remember me because I was that great landlord, and we had this connection. So, you never know. I haven't had one of those happen yet, but it will.
Yeah, you stacked up a number of things that everything is synergistic with everything else, right? So your real estate business puts you in situations where you can get your hands on properties because you're in listing appointments. Really good stuff, man. I'm really happy for you, and I'm impressed with the cerebral nature of your business strategy that you've created velocity with your actions and you created velocity with your capital and you reinvest it back in again into the funnel that drives the whole machine. But then you've got different points along the funnel that you own that also are tolls being paid by all the customers that are flowing through. Really cool stuff, man. So congratulations on a great year and another great year coming, and the changes and improvements to your life that happen. And the fact that you've got kids and your kids are watching this. You have a daughter you mentioned. Do you have any more?
I've got a daughter that's graduated from high school, already started on some of her real estate courses. And then I've got another one that I bought the condo for that's going to be going to the University of Texas in the fall.
Great.
Yeah.
And so they're watching. They're watching. I grew up with an entrepreneur. And so by the time I was, coming out of high school into college, I had one definitely firm belief in my mind, which is that if you try, it will work. Like entrepreneurship in America works. I watched it happen. I saw my mom go from mom, feed me a peanut butter and jelly sandwich to all of a sudden strapping on a gold jacket and being a Century 21 agent back in the 80s to starting your own firm to me taking over that firm many years later and blowing it out. But the biggest gift was the fact that I watched, like they watched. They were old enough to see you start in real estate. If they're the ages they are, they were paying attention when you started, and they watch you make these moves, and it makes them bulletproof for their life financially, where they start to realize that if they have assets and they use their heads and they use their effort and energy, they're in control. So very cool.
Well, I didn't have mentors from the business side in my family, but what I did get from mom and dad was a strong work ethic. And, so working hard was nothing new to me. It was just finding the right widget. And, how I got started in this business, kind of funny. So you will remember in the mid 80s, they used to have these infomercials that would come on about midnight. And you'd see these guys like Carlton Sheets and Dave Delgado, and typically they're sitting by a pool and there's the ocean behind them. And they're talking about how to get rich buying real estate with little or no money down. And so I would watch those things and pick off little nuggets. And then finally one day I bought the books and tapes, and, I was like 22. Within about a month, I'm putting together offers for 6 properties west of the University of Texas that were in FDIC foreclosure. I mean, I had no idea what I was doing. I was just reading the script. I pulled about $10,000 equity off of some credit cards where I learned how to amass credit cards to have access to cash, and another $5,000 that I had saved from a new business that I had started. And I went for it. And lo and behold, I got all 6 of these things that I bid on. And talk about an education. I mean, University of Hard Knocks. I became a landlord at 23 of student condos. So it's just extra challenging because there's students. And I was living in one of them. But that's how I got the fever or taste of the Kool-Aid as far as the real estate and how to leverage things. And, I held those properties for like 25 years. Right after I did that, I had an apparel business that went on for about 22 years. That was a lot of fun, and I learned a whole lot. I had a couple hundred employees, and and made some good money in many years. And then when I rolled all that up in 2010, I had another short stint with a different, like a med spa for 5 years. And then I started thinking about where I was at. Most of my friends where I live are realtors. I was like, this guy's making 7 figures. These guys are making $500,000. It's like, if they can do it, why can't I? So I got the license, and then, I applied my work ethic and my knowledge. I already knew the vocabulary of real estate. It wasn't something new to me, and I already knew how to sell. And so really it was just answer the phone and get the phone ringing to help people out. And it's not that complicated. I think a lot of people make it more complicated
You're an
than it is.
individual guy, so you're not a team. Do you have an assistant?
No, I'm a one-man show. Yeah.
That's awesome.
I don't have transaction coordinators.
You're a one-man wrecking
ball. That may have
ball.
to change, but we'll see.
That's another example, though, of that's the kind of thing that people like you can expand their production capacity by making one very well-proven move, which is start to offload some of the administrative work, start to get somebody to team you up. There are 2 things that we discovered in this already brilliant business that you've built that are, organizing your sphere, which, by the way, if you had an assistant, they'd be the ones that would go and do that, right? Get it all into a database and set it up, send you out the door every day with a piece of paper that has all the calls you need to make today or this week that you can, as you're driving around, knock them off. So I'm excited for you because you've already gotten to where you've gotten, but there are a couple of basics that you haven't even put in place yet that when you do, I know what's going to happen. It's going to jump.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Well, this was wonderful. Thank you. I'm so happy you were the maiden voyage of the Stars Among Us podcast. This was as good as I could have hoped for. Anything else you want to share before we shut down?
No, I think we touched on a lot of the stuff that I wanted to share. I'm always happy to share more of my story with anybody that may have an interest, whether it's buying and selling on the side while they're playing realtor, because it makes sense, and a lot of people don't take advantage of the fact that we get inside info. We know what things are worth, and why not? If you're trying to convince other people to buy and sell real estate and make money on it, why aren't you doing it yourself? It doesn't take a ton of money to do it. It just takes the right tools and knowledge.
Insider trading is legal in real estate. You can know things that are based upon you being on the ground and play on them, and it's totally ethical and totally legal. So, fantastic. So, Steve, how do people find you?
You can find me at Steve Dedear on Facebook. I've got a new website that'll be launching.
Steve D. Got it. Sorry.
Dedear, Dedear, and probably in about a month or so, I'll have stevededear.com, and you'll be able to reach me through there.
Awesome. So, all right. Thank you, sir. It's a pleasure talking with you.
Same here. All right. Have a good one.
Have a good one.